Pleasure is so often exhaustion, and hard work is rest. Now, obviously, hard work is in itself a not a restful activity, but I mean the work that in this day and age people seem to think is hard is often the work that rejuvenates us, that sets us up for success the next day, for future days, for the rest of our life. And the pleasures we think we need because we quote unquote work so hard is the stuff that sets us back further, that makes working hard harder and makes life not as enjoyable and makes us go nowhere fast. The person who lives for the weekend will say that, they work hard, they have the 40-hour work week and they work super hard all week and they need rest, they need a break from all the hard work they're doing. But that rest, that break, somehow consists of staying up till 2 in the morning, drinking alcohol, which inhibits rest, being in an environment that doesn't promote reflection or thinking or anything, and getting no sleep or ruining your sleep schedule by sleeping, to an hour that you were normally, I've already been up for 8 hours. And then you start the work week again, thanking God that you had time to give into these pleasures that supposedly rejuvenated you, but it actually were just instant gratification. There was just instant gratification that over a long period of time will not sustain you, and you'll end up feeling like you're living for nothing, like you have no purpose, like what are you doing with your life? And the work that no one wants to work all week and then say no to going out with people because they have to, they got to read, they got to journal, they got to get some good sleep, they want to just enjoy some time and reflect upon life, go for long walks, go for long hikes, go for some runs, go swimming, enjoy nature, those are the restful, rejuvenating things. But it seems like to me in this day and age, so many people think that that's the hard work. They think that that's the stuff that takes immense discipline. That's the stuff that, you know, can almost make life unbearable at times because, you're working so hard during the week and then the weekend comes and, I need to relax. I need to chill out. I got to do, I got to get my pleasure in for the week. I've had no fun all week. I'm going to die if I don't go have stupid fun, instant gratification, and then call it rest when actually it's setting me back further from real, true rest and peace and happiness. And pleasure is so often truly exhaustion, whether it be mental or whether it be physical. The sensual pleasures harm the body in many ways. You think you need to eat all this food, but it's making you lethargic, it's making you overweight, it's making you have brain fog. It's a pleasure you give into because you think, why not? Maybe you're not super overweight, maybe you're not overweight at all, but every weekend you just stuff your face to, you know, some stuff your face till your stomach hurts, and then you have no true good energy to do the real true good work, the real true hard work of the life worth living. Of there's work that there's things you can do in your free time that advance the work you do in your productive time, and not everything should be in service to productivity, but at the same time everything shouldn't be in service to pleasure and to rotting your brain and to just giving into pleasure for the sake of pleasure, for instant gratification. And if you don't work yourself with your free time, if you don't make yourself free with your free time, then you simply will never become free. How you spend your free time, if you spend your free time like a slave, then you are a slave. And if you spend your free time like a free man, then you are a free man. And you can be a slave to your desires, to your pleasures. When you do the things you tell yourself you're no longer going to do, when you do the things you know will have a bad impact on you, but you just don't care. Or you should be doing this other thing, but it's hard and the fruits are uncertain, so you don't want to plunge into it. So you give into something because you say you need rest, but it is actively making you need more rest. And you don't see it because it's giving you instant gratification. So it just builds up over time and over time. And then eventually you become a person you can't even recognize, a pleasure-seeking zombie who the only way they can rest is while they're smoking or drinking or going out, because if they're not, they have FOMO, or they have dopamine issues because they're not getting that hit of dopamine they normally get every night from smoking weed or something of that nature. And so you can't even rest when you try to get rid of these bad habits. It's like the alcoholic who quits, goes cold turkey, and then gets withdrawals and is very sick from not drinking alcohol. That's horrible, and it's obviously from a stream of bad activities. And yeah, your peace will be destroyed for a little bit because you're not going to feel so great not drinking alcohol. But in the long run, abstaining from that pleasure and getting pleasure from virtuous acts, from improving yourself, from betterment, from self-care and self-love, and from nature, and from true rest, true peace. This is long-term benefits that you'll see fruits in every other aspect of your life. And as I said, not everything is in service to productivity, but true rest advances your productivity. It looks like hard work in this day and age, but I mean, some people gain their pleasure from, you know, reading philosophy at night, and others gain it from, watching the newest Netflix series. And one person wakes up the next day with their brain truly refreshed, with great thoughts, with hope for the future, with regulated dopamine, with focus and attention. And the other person wakes up thinking about how quick the day went, how they can't believe it's already the work week again, how they just want to sit down and do nothing, and they can't focus, and they just want to be lazy and chill out the rest of the day because they have no energy. We live in a day and age where nobody has energy because everyone is destroying their energy with pleasure. They think that the rest that they are partaking in is actively inhibiting their rest. And people are in such a bad cycle that to abstain from it for a few days will make you even tired, and will make you not want to pursue it because it's hard at first. It's hard at first to abstain from those things. Like I said, like you get withdrawals from things, and it's the nature of the beast. But it's really sad when you think about, I'm not doing something very harmful for me, and it's making me feel bad. Like to me, that's a wake up call that I'm at a bad state in my life and I need to change, because if I don't change, then nothing will change. And when you're at a state like that and nothing changes, that's not good. And I'm not saying that we should abstain from pleasure, 24/7, but we should need to have a better relationship with pleasure. And we should try to obtain pleasures from things that give real fulfilling true pleasure. Epicurus, the pleasure-seeking philosopher of 500 BC, who has been criticized by the Stoics and many others for saying that pleasure is the only good in life. has a very reserved idea of seeking pleasure. His pleasure has deep-seated roots in moderation, and he famously says in one of his lines, he says, "Low living and high thinking is the good life. That's the pleasurable life." So his idea of pleasure is so much different than what a hedonist idea of pleasure would be. He says pleasure is the goal of life, and the hedonist thinks, okay, lust, greed, gluttony, the instant gratification, drugs, sensual pleasures. And Epicurus would say, no, it's barely eating any food, only eating enough food so that your stomach doesn't hurt and you have enough energy to think highly, to contemplate, to enjoy your leisure. That's what Epicurus would say, and that's true pleasure. I think Epicurus is a great philosopher, and he's misunderstood by many Stoics, whether that be from the followers of Epicureanism who misread the doctrine, or from closed-minded Stoics not looking into what the doctrine really says. But from my looking, and from Seneca's looking at Epicureanism, there's deep-seated roots in moderation, and the pleasure that he preaches is admirable. It's not it's not gluttony, it's moderation. That's the pleasure that he preaches. It's not vices, it's virtue. He says the good life is the pleasurable life, he says, is the life of virtue. I mean, it's almost just like a difference of definitions of pleasure. He says pleasure and he thinks of high thinking, moral excellence, virtue, and another person thinks of hedonism and instant gratification. And that's just not what he's saying. And there is a time and place for these things. And depending on your age, you may be more susceptible to giving into certain things just because of the nature of who you are, the things you've done, what you haven't done, new experiences, all those things. But I think we should really try to advance and get our deep-seated pleasure, get our real pleasure from things that are worth being pleasurable, that make you feel better after the fact. Because Epicurus would also say that pleasure is pleasure is the whole experience. The pleasure if you do something, the pleasure isn't just in the moment of the pleasure. It's in the doing of it, how burdensome, how embarrassing, how disgusting was the act. And then how do you feel after? What were the effects, how long was your hangover, so to speak? He said that's the whole experience of pleasure. So he would not do something for a little bit of pleasure in this moment to have immense regret in both these moments. And that's what we need to look at pleasure as a whole. And I'm obviously using the hedonistic idea of pleasure in this video, where pleasure is exhaustion. It exhausts your soul, it exhausts your hard work, your energy to do hard work. And I guess today's definition of toil, I'm saying, is resting us. Reading for 4 hours, writing for a couple hours, going to the gym, going for long walks, being very attentive and focused in the task at the present moment. These are the things that bring rest to the soul. And when you work hard, you can actually truly rest hard. And you're not going to want to do these trivial, instant gratification seeking things, because you're going to want to have true rest. And you're going to want to get back to your work at 100%. That's why I value sleeping so much. I hate when I get a bad night's rest of sleep, because it inhibits my work that I'm trying to do. I might have received pleasure from staying up late and doing the things that I did with the people that I did them with. But the whole experience is, how do I feel the next day when, I sit down to read and I'm struggling to read a book that I should be able to, with a little bit of effort, comprehend fairly decently. But I have to summon all of my willpower to stay focused and attentive and reread things. And it's like, was the pleasure really worth it? Was it really beneficial? Was it true rest? I said it was rest. I said I needed rest. but then I went into this activity that clearly inhibited my true rest, and I'm working worse, I feel worse, I regret it. To me, that is not worth it. But it seems to me that that is the day and age we live in, and so many people, you know, it's so hard to even comprehend or understand the life that you are not living. I remember when I was younger, I had a very bad diet, and my stomach used to hurt all the time. You know, I remember just like my stomach hurting like all the time, and I wasn't able to like eat breakfast in the morning, and I just remember always being like my stomach hurt. And then I remember I started eating healthy, and my stomach stopped hurting. And I remember for like the first like 6 months, it was magic. And now I take it for granted. My stomach never hurts. I'm never, you know, never like that because I've eaten healthy ever since. But I think about it at times, and it was like at first I ate healthy solely for that feeling. I started drinking water because I wouldn't have headaches, and I started eating fruits because it didn't make my stomach hurt, and all those things. And then, for the first 6 months, it was clear. And then now it's just something I do. And I forget how beneficial it is till, one day I eat pizza from, a really greasy pizza place, and my stomach hurts. And I'm like, gosh, like, geez, like, this isn't worth it. Like, I forgot this is how I feel when I eat junk food because I never do, frankly. Um, and then, I'm very good about drinking water. And then sometimes I won't drink enough water and I get a headache. And I'm like, oh, yeah, this is how I used to always feel because I never used to drink water. And it's just the things you take. I would have never have understood that other life. Someone would have told me about the fruits of these, what I would thought was hard work, being disciplined with eating healthy and going to the gym and all this stuff. I'm like, oh, it sounds like hard work, but it's actually a lot harder having your stomach hurt all the time and feeling like crap. It's actually a lot harder living that life. But you just need to switch your vantage point. You need to switch your lifestyle, and you'll see how much more fruitful the hardworking life is than the life of pleasure, and how much more pleasure there is in hard work than in sloth, than in hedonism. The true pleasure is in virtue, in discipline, in hard work, in the high thinking life. I agree with Epicurus 100%, and Aristotle for that matter. Aristotle says that the good life is the life of contemplation and leisure, and also says, well, it's beside the point, but um, the life of leisure and contemplation. And I 100% agree with that. I vastly enjoy low living and high thinking. I love, maybe it's just, I've heard the term mental masturbation before, and maybe it just is, just, tickling my fancy with thoughts I think are profound and coming to understandings. And, maybe it is, but I think it's a high form of pleasure, and it's better than a lot of things we could be doing. And it's advancing your mind, which is good for health span and lifespan. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, is the goal of life, no, I mean, not the goal of life, but is one of our goals not to be smarter, not to have a better functioning brain, to be more intellectual, to be wiser? I mean, I think these are things, if you ask people up front, they would say yes. They may not agree to the work that it requires, but on the surface, they would say yes. And they just don't understand if they change their lifestyle around, they would receive far more pleasure than the trivial, regretful pleasure that they are immersing themselves in and day out, and how much more rest they would have if they stopped giving in to the rest that they think is rest, which is actually exhaustion, which is actually inhibiting their rest, which is actually making life far more burdensome, far more sad, unhappy, cruel, meaningless. I forget which Stoic said it, but I remember I think about it a lot. I think it was Marcus, but it was something along the lines of we need to learn to obtain pleasure from good things. We need to take our pleasure from, you know, being kind, from being understanding, from being courageous, from our discipline, from virtue, from hard work, from wisdom, from all these things. These are the things we need to learn to obtain pleasure from, not the hedonistic things. And I believe there's deep-seated rest in that. And there's deep-seated hard work and hedonistic pleasure.